Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my podcast, Coffee's on Me, David Quan, where I strive to give guests legacy-worthy interviews that listeners can enjoy while cooking, commuting, relaxing, or walking their pets. And Dr. Laffer, I know you have many pets. When I started this Passion Project podcast at a low point of my time in Cambridge, I was genuinely motivated by three founding ideals. Number one, purpose of giving. Number two, learning from others. And number three, sharing of stories, which are aspirations still making up the content descriptions. Admittedly, I often listen back to these long-form conversations to laugh at just how naive I was and am. But what gives me the enthusiasm and courage to host and share is the hopeful aspiration that this passion project, if wholly true to those founding motivations about giving, learning, and sharing, can be a worthwhile pursuit. I'd like to invite all of our listeners to join the community of 20,000 plus at coffeesonmedavidquan.com, where we share legacy-worthy life study and career interviews, systems, and resources flourishing our hero's journey. You can receive my gift repository and newsletter now 100% free, all to pay forward my blessings. With over 100 legacy-worthy interviews and 100,000 plus downloads, this community is about giving, learning, and sharing. Just before I share the official biography, I also want to express my gratitude to those who made today's conversation possible. The Oxford Union for hosting Dr. Laffer's address where we first connected, and Dr. Laffer's team at Laffer Associates, Gillian Rooney and Belinda Dwyer, for their coordination and support in making this interview happen. I would also like to extend a special thank you to our live audience joining us today from all around the world. It was wonderful to have our brief meet and greet before this recording, and I look forward to our Q&A afterwards. I'm pleased to continue an extraordinary season of conversations. Following recent interviews with Cambridge Chancellor candidate Dr. Mohammed Al-Arian, who I believe is a friend of yours, Dr. Laffer.
Yes, he is.
Our Sama Project co-founder Richard Verity, viral PhD scholar Dr. Ali Lukes, Bain senior partner Dr. Henrik Norjoks, and former McKinsey consulting partner and new CEO at MatCat Matthew Robb, alongside my Cambridge Union election special series and an upcoming interview with Oliver Wyman CEO Nick Studer. Today's episode marks the very first of 2026 and holds extraordinary significance. Personally, as someone who studied education across both Cambridge and Oxford, worked as an analyst at Goldman Sachs navigating the complexities of emerging markets, and whose late grandfather pioneered private education in China by founding one of its largest private universities through a life of service and sacrifice, I've long been fascinated by the relationship between incentives and opportunities. My grandfather believed that young people are like water heated to 70 degrees. With the right conditions and support, they too can flourish. His vision was that education, not profit, should serve the public good. Today's guest has spent 6 decades arguing something remarkably complementary, that the right incentive structures unlock human potential and create prosperity. His ideas have shaped economic thinking and policy on both sides of the Atlantic, from the Reagan Revolution to Thatcher's Britain. And now, with his latest book on the UK economy, his voice enters our national debate at a pivotal moment. Now to the official biography and introduction of Dr. Arthur Laffer. Dr. Arthur Bates Laffer is the founder and chairman of Laffer Associates, an economic research and consulting firm, and is universally known as the father of supply-side economics. In 1999, Time magazine named him one of the century's greatest minds for creating the Laffer curve. In 2019, he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor awarded by the United States for his contribution to economics. Born on August 14, 1940 in Youngstown, Ohio, Arthur Laffer earned his BA in economics from Yale University in 1963 before obtaining both an MBA and PhD in economics from Stanford University. His career in policy began remarkably early. He joined the University of Chicago faculty in 1967, and in 1970s became the first chief economist at the Office of Management and Budget under Director George Shultz during the Nixon administration. The moment that would etch his name into economic folklore occurred in 1974 at the Two Continents restaurants in Washington, D.C. Over dinner with White House Chief of Staff Donald Rumsfeld and Deputy Dick Cheney and journalist Jude Wanniski, Laffer grabbed a cloth napkin and sketched a simple curve illustrating a revolutionary idea. that at both 0% and 100% tax rate, government revenue is zero, and somewhere in between lies an optimum. That napkin now resides in the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. Dr. Laffer served on President Reagan's Economic Policy Advisory Board for both terms from 1981 to 1989, where his ideas shaped the tax-cutting policy that triggered a worldwide movement. He also advised Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher on fiscal policy during the 1980s, making his influence truly transatlantic. Beyond the government, he held professorships at the University of Chicago, the University of Southern California, where he was the Charles B. Thornton Professor of Business Economics, and Pepperdine University, where he served as Distinguished University Professor. Now at age 85, Dr. Laffer remains as intellectually vital as ever, as we can see today. He has authored and co-authored numerous influential books, including Trumponomics, Taxes Have Consequences, and the annual Rich States, Poor States Economic Competitive Index. Most recently, in October 2025, he co-authored Prosperity Through Growth, Boosting Living Standards in an Age of Autocracy and AI, a blueprint for reviving the UK economy that draws on interviews with 5 former Prime Ministers and 9 former Chancellors. The book warns that without policy changes, Britain is forecast to slide from 30th to 48th in global GDP per capita by 2050, overtaken by Poland and Turkey, and argues that this decline is not inevitable. From his home in Nashville, Tennessee, where he leads Laffer Associates and the Laffer Center, Dr. Laffer continues to mentor, teach, and shape policy debates with the same energy that led the Los Angeles Times to name him among a dozen who shaped the 80s, and the Wall Street Journal to feature him in a gallery of the greatest people who influence our daily business. Dr. Laffer, a very impressive introduction. Welcome to my podcast, Coffees on Me, David Quan.
Thank you very much. It's very flattering, and thank you very much. You could go on and on if you would like to. I'm enjoying it very much. No, just thank you, David.
I could absolutely go on and on because there is so much to cover from your extraordinary life. But amongst all of the achievements, the most important thing that I didn't mention is how you won Father of the Year award, which you mentioned is probably the highest honor that you've received. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, I was selected not for the reason that I have 6 children. I was selected as Father of the Year, which is because of your professional life. But I was so proud because I am a father of 6 children. They're my love, they're my life, they're my dreams. I've got 14 grandchildren. I've got 4 great-grandchildren. And it's just, they're the reason I exist, and the world I love for them to have is why I work.
What do they make of their father as such an influential and famous economist? Like dinner tables in the family, quite debate-oriented?
Yeah, they think I smell bad and I'm grumpy and I'm short, fat, and old and ugly. They just treat me like any grandfather.
So there was a story about your daughter Rachel, how she tossed her pet weasel Fern into Nancy Reagan's lap at a dinner party, and you said that you never come close to heart stoppage. Could you actually share what happened that night and why it was such an incident?
I can. I was a single father at the time, raising 4 children. My first wife had left, and I was raising our 4 children there. And we had the Reagans over for dinner, and the Darts and a couple of other couples as well were over for dinner. And my kids all did the serving. People would get dinner, and then my kids did all of that. And at the end of the evening, I gave my kids a chance to show off be the center of attention, and each one of the kids was able to bring one of our animals in and describe it to everyone at the table. There were about 10 people at the table, Jack Kemp and some of the others, and Holmes Tuttle, Jack Rather, and a few others. And so they would come in. My eldest came in with a turtle, someone else came in with something else. But my youngest, Rachel, at the time, my youngest, had our pet weasel. It's a ferret, I think, it was a weasel, ferret, whatever. It was our pet. It was named Fern. And she was 6 years old at the time, and she came and said to everyone, my name is Rachel Laffer, and this is my pet Fern, and Fern is a weasel. If you know what the ferrets look like, they have they're long things look like rat tails, and they've got black eyes, and they sniff around, they have little weak whiskers there. And she went and showed everyone at the table, and everyone was taken aghast, And Nancy Reagan was especially shocked, and she said, "Oh, my darling, fine. Please keep that away from me. It makes my skin crawl." And my little girl said, "My daddy has always told me if you're afraid of an animal, you should hold it." And she flips it up in the air onto Nancy Reagan's lap. And I saw the whole world flash before me that this was the end of my life. Well, no, she caught the weasel. She then handed it back. "No, darling, seriously, take this back. I don't want to hold it." But that's the story we tell, and it's a fun story. Later on, years later, almost every time I met with Nancy Reagan, she would say, "And how's that awful little animal?" And I wasn't really quite sure whether she meant my daughter or the weasel itself, but it was a fun story. It's a great story, and it's a true story. And my Rachel lives in London right now. By the way, she's almost 60 years old, and it's a long, long time ago.
Speaking of your family and animals, your household apparently included 15 rabbits, 10 parrots, 4 macaws, 3 tortoises, 2 horses, a Jack Russell Terrier, and a Norwegian blue fox, along with your 6 children. And you once considered apparently becoming a biologist before becoming an economist. Is there any connection between your love of taxonomy and biology and your love of understanding taxation systems later on?
Very close related. By the way, I was thinking of it biology after economics, not before economics. So, but
Okay.
yeah, and I've raised animals all my life. And when I was a young boy, my dad had dogs, Airedale Terriers. We were show dogs. We had a lot of animals then too. Probably with 50 dogs at any one time in our kennels. So, we showed dogs in Britain, all over the world. So I've always been very much into animals, and I love them, and I love, working with them, and I love the biology of the animals. My parrots, great. My macaws flew free, so that's not the way most people have them. But I drive to USC, where I was the Thornton professor, and I could notice my blue and gold macaw flying way up in the sky, following my car. I had no idea where the macaw went during the day, but when I came home at night, the macaw would fly home at night. I had a lot of other macaws, etc., turtles. Arctic fox, I had Arctic fox. Celine and Mimi were them. They're just wonderful, wonderful. The diversity, the spectrum, and really the innate intelligence of life form is just fantastic. I tried to limit myself to non-hostile, non-dangerous animals.
No snakes.
No poisonous snakes. I lived in Rancho Santa Fe, California. We had 17 acres there, and it's the center of rattlesnakes, and rattlesnakes are very, very deadly poisonous, but they are not, they're not dangerous unless you provoke them. And so I had a lot of, but I never did have animals that were dangerous. And I had one of the best tree collections in the country as well. I'm a botanist as well.
You also have one of the largest private shell collections in the world, right?
I did have that when I was young. It wasn't when I was young. I had a great shell collection, but not one of the greatest ones. But later on, fossil collections I did. I just got rid of my fossils, I think, in this last year, but I had a phenomenal fossil collection. None of my kids really are into the fossils, so I didn't want to keep it for having it because they wouldn't have appreciated it. So I gave away and sold all of the fossils I had. But I had an amazing fossil collection just up until a year and a half ago or so. So I'm a collector by nature, as you can tell.
Yeah.
And I've been fascinated with topics, and I just go right into them deeply, as far as whether it be mathematics, biology, whether it be linguistics. I really love science and learning. Like your title, giving, learning, and sharing. And I just love that. That's been the motto of my life as well.
I love that. Which I would like to now move on to. So we had the warm up with some of your interesting collections and habits, but I'd like to now kind of go back to your roots. In particular, I know your father, ran Cleaver Corporation, making, bearings and bushings for cars and planes, and your mother was involved in local politics. So from your childhood, how did watching American industrial capitalism at its peak shape your economic thinking, and what was home life like at the time with your mum and dad both quite actively involved?
Well, I don't know that I thought of it in terms of an intellectual area, but I come from a very privileged family. I'm a fourth generation Yaley. I went to the same prep school my father did, my brothers, just so we were a very privileged family. My mom's family my grandfather started 4 steel companies. My other grandfather was a brain surgeon. He was a brain surgeon at Western Reserve Medical as well as University of Vienna in Austria. So it was a very fine, background, great intellectual background, and I just adored it. I mean, I had a terrific time as a child, being able to go to the schools I did, be able to learn the subjects I did, and face the discipline that was really very important in my prep schools that I went to. And I'm sure it's a lot like the British system of schools as well. And then Yale, we went there, and Yale, I found myself, in the first 3 years at Yale, I went from being a very good student freshman year because of my background. Second year, I didn't do very well. Third year, I think I was second from the bottom of all of those students who were not kicked out. I really did horribly my third year. I had not matured, and so I took a year's leave of absence from Yale. By the way, a lot of kids did. Dick Cheney did, but he was my classmate as well, and I could give you lots of other names. And I went then. I went.
Is that when you went to Munich and you discovered economics?
I did. I flipped from math to economics there. I worked in Britain. I worked in Hythe, Hampshire. I had a little place in London, Upper Berkeley Street there, and called Mackay's Bed and Breakfast is where I stayed in London, right near Mont Blanc. So it was really fun, and I got a great experience there with Britain and with Germany. And I met my first wife there in Athens, Greece, at the train station. I was a translator. I translated several languages at the time. I've had a good linguistic skills at the time, and just fun stuff. That's the history. Came back to Yale. I became a ranking scholar. Bam! I learned my way. I was straight and narrow, followed it, and then I went to Stanford Business School. Did really well there. Flipped over to the econ department there. Got my PhD in economics. Taught at the University of Chicago, which was the place to be. I got job offers from everywhere, and then the rest is in stone.
Absolutely. I still want to stay in that childhood, and it's really interesting how you mentioned privilege again, because in an interview you had very candidly said that you got into Yale by privilege because your dad went there, both of your brothers went there.
And my nephews, nieces, my daughter. I mean, it's just. I'm not sure Yale's happy with my family, but we're very happy with Yale.
I mean, the legacy emission system in America is obviously a very controversial topic, but how do you personally reconcile your own kind of privilege and experience with supply side economics emphasis on merit and incentive? Is that something that you reflect on both?
It has a lot of impact on the way I think and the way others think. And let me tell you, I love privilege, and I wish everyone could have privilege. The dream is not to reduce privilege. The dream is to make it available to everyone. And I've always had that view of life, is balancing up, not balancing down. I don't hate rich people. I love poor people. And I want to make poor people rich, not rich people poor. It's a very different structure. If I can talk to you about some of the people I went to school with there, you know them all, Larry Summers, and they were all my classmates there. Georgie Akerlof was my classmate at Yale in the senior seminar, and we all came in. A lot of these people did not come from privileged background, and it's a very different thing. They came and tried to learn their skills in order to have a good profession and make money and be successful. I didn't have that push. I came to economics because I loved it, not because I needed it to have a good career. And so when I came to economics, if I can use the German phrase, sei in Ehrfurcht vor Gott, I came to worship economics. It's just amazing when you look at the world of all the prosperity, all the things that are there. How in the hell does all of this happen? How does life evolve on Earth? I mean, what is this Big Bang and all the it's all of these mysteries and wonderful, wonderful secrets that the universe has. And I was not pushed by economic needs to be forced into some profession or another. And I really was able to choose what I wanted to do rather than what I had to do to become successful. And I just loved economics. And I didn't go into economics to control people. I went into economics to be awed by what existed. And it's a very different thing. My friends in economics and the PhD programs, et cetera, all went in there to be able to control the economy. And I just the exact opposite. Now, don't take it that I am against controlling the economy. I'm not. It's like if you're in medicine and there's some great big green thing hanging out of a person's ear, and you know the last 5,000 people who had that green thing all died. Yes, I would take off that green thing, surgically remove the green thing. I would. But my view is basically to study what the beauty of economics is rather than how to use that economics to control people's lives. And I'm really here to see generic prosperity in the planet rather than my own personal grandeur to there. I made a vow in 1972 that I would never, ever, ever accept money from government ever again. And the reason is very simple. Once you work for government, you become an employee. And as an employee, you owe an oath of loyalty to your employer. And these people, and Janet Yellen and all these others I've mentioned, and remember they were all my classmates or very close to it, and I know them all infinitely well. We just come from very different backgrounds. And you know, these people will, working for governments, they will rebut arguments they know to be true, David, in order to curry favors with their political benefactors. And that is not what I ever wanted to do. So I never took a job with Reagan. I never took a job with Trump or anyone else where I got compensated. When I go in there, I tell people what I think is right, and I'm quite, as you know, I make a lot of mistakes. I mean, I do. I'm prone to mistakes. I make a lot of mistakes, but never because I'm paid to do so. Never because I'm employed to do so. So that is the background of my background, which gives me a sort of a background like a John F. Kennedy or like a Donald Trump, less so like Ronald Reagan, but those who are from very privileged backgrounds really come in there because they want to do, they wanted the world to be a better place. And I feel very much that way, but I really came in there just to study and worship the phenomenal field called economics. It's just spectacular what's there. And that's my background. It's a very different one from my colleagues at the university. They came in there because they wanted a good profession to be at the top of their field and then implement their ideas in government. I'm not that way. I have no desire to implement things. In fact, my motto is, don't just stand there, undo something. I think that nature has created a phenomenal set of economics, and it really doesn't need much control. It really does not. It's done really well for the last 4 billion years without my control, okay? And when you think of the massive intelligence and the massive amount of successes that the economy has had, it has had it without big government. I mean, 1910, total government spending as a share of GDP in the United States was 3%. 3%. We had become the preeminent economic force on the planet Earth without Franklin Delano Roosevelt, without the government control of money, without all of that. We had discovered, you know, Britain became the industrial place of the world without big government. I really do want to go back to where the economy serves us, not we control the economy. Is where my sort of orientation, and I love economic prosperity, and I love it seeing, especially in the poor, the lower groups in the society. They have done nothing but benefit from economic growth, and I dream of making the poor richer, not making the rich poor.
We'll definitely get more onto the economic side of things, but one of the threads that you've mentioned about decision making, about what to do and choosing what not to do, is something that I was thinking about as I was researching your profile. And there's one particular anecdote that's not always talked about, but while at Stanford, you worked as a night watchman at Shockley Transistor, the company that your father's firm later acquired. So William Shockley himself actually asked you to become his research assistant for his genetics work, but you declined. Given that what we know now about, Shockley's genetics interests that have led him, do you think about that fork in the road, and how do you generally think about the principles that you stand for in terms of how to engage or how not to engage in things?
Yeah, I missed a bullet. It went right by me. The reason I didn't take it, I love Bill Shockley. He was one of the inventors, Nobel Prize for the germanium transistor, not the silicon one, but the germanium transistor. Phenomenal man, an Englishman. I drove around this big old Jaguar and was very entertaining as night watchman. I was there every night for 4 hours, 24/7, for there, and he would come in and he'd sit and chat with me, and he was just, I would adored him and he liked me a lot as well, but if I'd have taken the job at the university as his research assistant, I would not have had all the time off. As night watchman, I had to do about 15 minutes worth of work every hour, checking the DI water and the transistor blade, making sure nothing was wrong, and I did my rounds. But then I had 45 minutes alone at my front desk that I could study. And so that's why I love this job. I worked at the minimum wage of $1 an hour. I was very pleased to work at that. I needed the money. Our family, even though we were quite well off, never indulged the kids. Once I left my property, I got cut off from all money. So I had to work this money to get the money I had a child and a wife, and I was in school and all that. But that's the reason I didn't take it, is because if I'd taken the job with Shockley, I would have actually had to work for him. And I couldn't do my studying. So that's my excuse, and that's what I'm going to live to.
Fair enough. I just want to move to your Chicago years, which is kind of the time that you've almost established yourself as a prodigy and also had some lasting tensions with academic economics. So on the academic side, you received tenure at University of Chicago, I believe, at age 27, which is the fastest in the university's history. What enabled your success there?
Well, I published a lot of articles. In fact, just for the economics people there, I had a piece in the American Economic Review before I entered the graduate program at Stanford. So I was, pretty creative at that time, did a lot of articles in the top journals. And even before, I got my first year's appointment, which is a 3-year appointment, I took my first year as a leave of absence. I went with my professor at Stanford, Émile Desprez, to Brookings Institution for a big project on international financial intermediation. So I took my first year's leave of absence. I then came back to Chicago, where I'd never been before. And so I was blessed with the review committee, which was just the only thing that was up for grabs was reappointment. Most assistant professors or teachers there were granted 2 years of there, and then were told to go somewhere else. They weren't going to be tenure track, and I thought that I'd get a 3-year appointment if I was really lucky. And then they did something. They broke all the rules, and they not only gave me a 3-year appointment, they gave me tenure, which was after 2 years at Chicago. I got tenure, which was not done before. They wished to remove it, by the way, a year or two later. Let me just tell you, they had not done that.
Yeah.
I caused a great deal of embarrassment, because when I got the tenure, I still had not finished my PhD.
Yeah.
And so when I got to Washington and I got in the huge maelstrom of Nixon and George Shultz and 1065 and all that, and I was on the cover of magazines, and quite controversial character.
So why are they laughing at Laffer, or why were they?
That is Paul Samuelson's tape. Why they are laughing at Laffer was very unkind, very unprofessional, by the way, as well. It was slurs the whole way. But I knew Paul Samuelson well. His daughter was one of my students at Stanford. Jane Samuelson was in fact, she was one of my favorite students, and I was her favorite professor. I went over there with my wife and had dinner with the students, the senior students. So, it's all this mix, but he got his knickers in a twist. And a lot of others did as well at the time, because they hated Nixon. And I then got put up for whether I was going to be tried or not for having lied about whether I had my dissertation. Well, they looked at the facts. They found that I did not lie. I did not have the dissertation, but I didn't lie about it. And by the way, as soon as this controversy broke, I got my dissertation completed, I think, in 6 weeks. So it was very close. It was all but dissertation, and the dissertation was done except for one signature. So I had been sloppy in not finishing it up when I went to the White House. I did not, and I should have, but I didn't. But that's all water over the dam. I stayed at Chicago another 4 or 5 years. I went to the University of Southern California as the Charles B. Thornton Professor in 1976, and was there for 10 years, and my career from then on.
Just before I ask you an intellectual question, there's a small little detail about Stanford eventually conferred your doctorate in January 1972.
Yes.
although they misspelt your name as author instead of Laffer on the diploma. So does that misspelling, did that bother you, or is it a good story now?
I find it very humorous. Here you are at the elite level of the highest level of all academic, the PhD, and the guys misspell your name. And it's not like I have a weird name. It's not like with Sedillas and all sorts of, no, no, no. They made my name Author Laffer, not Arthur Laffer. And author, and you know, and you think I'm sloppy. Woo!
So, an intellectual question then. You disagreed fundamentally with Milton Friedman, who many of us have studied as well, monetary policy. He championed floating exchange rate, whereas you were a gold standard man. You said that floating rates just don't work, but Friedman actually convinced Nixon to abandon gold in 1971. So 50 years later, who do you think was right?
Yeah, well, let me just say I was in the White House then in 1971.
Yeah.
George Shultz was my boss. George Shultz and Milton Friedman were great, great friends. It was George Shultz that probably more than anyone convinced Nixon to go off gold and to go off fixed exchange rates and to go to floating exchange rates. I wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal. I left in 72. I wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal when the Smithsonian Accord finally did break the link with gold. The bitter fruits of devaluation. My argument was that by devaluing the dollar, by going off gold, by letting the dollar price of gold rise, we would be in for double-digit inflation. My boss, who, by the way, the finest man on earth, George Shultz is the finest man on earth. He and I, that's not saying disagreed. He was really the greatest influence around Nixon in many, many ways. But in floating exchange rates, we did have a major disagreement, and I wrote this piece, and he said it was the worst piece he'd ever read in his life, and I should voluntarily retract it from the Wall Street Journal and not publish that paper. I went against that wish. I published it. I got letters from Milton Friedman, from Gottfried Habler, from Paul Samuels, from all saying how crappy an economist I was, how terrible it was, and they all went through the analysis in their own framework about how inflation would not pick up, how interest rates wouldn't go up. Well, within a year, we had double-digit inflation, double-digit interest rates, and I won, they lost. And, even to this day, the silliness of floating exchange rates is there. What you need to do is have a monetary standard. Now, it doesn't have to be gold, but I think the whole thing of cryptocurrencies today is an attempt by the private sector to replace government-controlled money, the monopoly of governments on money. Prior to 1913 in the U.S., we did not have any government-controlled money. All money in the U.S. was private, and all the government did was set the value of money as being 1/20th of an ounce of gold or 1 ounce of silver. But I'll go into that with you later. But, it's really amazing how bad it has been, the consequences of government taking control of money, and how the currency, since 1913, the value of the price level has risen, 33-fold? Prior to that, from 1776 until 1913, the price level in the U.S. was stable. There was no inflation over that 135 years. From the next period, bam, we had this huge inflation, which is exactly what I thought would happen. And by the way, I wasn't alone. Bob Mundell, obviously the most fantastic, agreed totally with me. We worked together a lot. Paul Volcker was clearly with me all the way on this. So it wasn't as though this was some kooky outbreak. There are a lot of people who thought we should have a sound standard.
People on this call, we're university students. University's a very formative time where we're all trying to identify ourselves and to build an identity. So for you, I believe that Fisher Black, who created the Black-Scholes formula, was reportedly your closest friend at Chicago, and you both challenged Friedman's monetarism together. What did you learn from that friendship and just friendships in general during those formative years?
You make my heart pat because he died a very early death. He left the university and went to Goldman Sachs, and I just love Fisher Black, and he looked at things he was a mathematician by trade, and that's why you see Black-Scholes and all that. And he didn't even get the opportunity to get the Nobel Prize. The three other people, he was clearly the number one of Black-Scholes, and Scholes was his understudy, and Merton and the others. And, he didn't get the credit. He and I saw the world in very much the same way of incentives. My role, the way I do things, is very mathematical, very structured, very doctrinal, if you will. and so was Fisher Black. The one thing we disagreed with about Milton Friedman most of all, and Fisher did it in a beautiful way, was the role of money in the economy. For me, in all markets, there's a demand curve and there's a supply curve. In no market is there only a demand curve and no supply curve. Or in other markets, there's no demand curve, it's all supply. And Milton Friedman looked at money as if it were 100% supply determined. If you double the money supply, sooner or later you're going to double prices. That was the way. But there are two things here, and let me, if I can, use it with regard to apples. So the example I loved using is apples. Just take it away from policy for a second. What happens if a tree, the trees, have a bumper crop in apples in 1 year? If there's a huge exogenous increase in the quantity of apples due to weather or whatever, what happens to the value of each apple? Well, if you have a huge increase in the supply of apples, the value of each apple will decline. You with me?
Yeah.
The same thing is true with money. If you have a huge increase, an exogenous increase in the supply of money, what will happen to the value of each dollar? It will decline as well. You'll have inflation. The value of each dollar will decline. If, for example, there's a shortage of apples 1 year, let's say we have a bad crop year, you have a huge reduction in the supply of apples produced that year, just exogenous supply, what will happen to the value of each apple? It'll go way up, all right? And you'll have very high valued apples with low quantity. All right, this is the quantity theory of money. If you have a very big exogenous drop in the quantity of money, what will happen to the value of each dollar bill? It will go way up. And here Milton Friedman says with an increase in the quantity, you'll get the value decline. With a reduction in the quantity, you'll get the value increase. That's where he stops. But that's true of supply. But now let me take you to demand. Let's imagine for a moment, David, that we discover that apples have certain aphrodisiac or hallucinogenic qualities. Woo! We all of a sudden discover that they've got this. What will happen to the demand for apples? There'll be a huge increase in the demand for apples. With a huge increase in the demand for apples, the value of each apple, the price of each apple will rise, will it not? That will induce people to plant more trees, to pick their trees cleaner. There'll be an increase in the quantity of apples with the price of apples rising if it's demand induced. Now imagine we find that apples cause cancer. Oh my God, there'll be a huge drop in the demand for apples. The quantity of apples will decline. The value of apples will decline even further. When you look at the relationships here, when you have stochastic shocks to excess demand functions, I'm just going to say it technically with you. When you have shocks in supply, you would expect a monetarist response. But when you have shocks in demand, you'd expect a supply side response. If you have a bumper crop in apples, if you have a huge increase in the demand for apples, the value of apples will increase, not go down. And the battle Milton Friedman and I had every meeting in front of Reagan was he said, the money supply is rising dramatically. It is true, the quantity of money was rising very, very dramatically, but not because the Fed was printing money, but because GDP growth was huge. And if you look at the Cambridge equation, there is a huge increase in the demand. Interest rates were falling, so if you look at the Keynesian L2, the speculative demand for money with lower interest rates, the speculative demand for money increases dramatically. If you look at that, we had a huge increase in the quantity of money during the Reagan period, not because supply was printed too much, but because there was a huge growth in demand. And far from worrying about inflation, which Milton Friedman was telling Reagan, you're going to have hyperinflation, you're going to have blah, 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 blah. I said, no, you're not. You're going to get inflation dropping dramatically because the demand for apples is causing the growth in apples, not the supply. And we had this to battle, and again, I won, he lost. We had a huge increase in the quantity of money during the Reagan period. That's true. We had a huge drop in interest rates. We had a huge expansion in real output, employment, and production. And all of that led to a great increase with falling prices, not rising prices. The quantity theory of money is absolutely nonsense. It makes no sense whatsoever. When you look at it, private sectors and demand are equally as important as supply. And you can't just look at the quantity of bank money and say that's the thing that causes inflation. And I'm not a monetarist in any way, shape, or form. And whenever it's been put to the test, I believe my model is won, their model is lost. Huge increases in growth, like under Kennedy, like under Harding and Coolidge, like under Reagan. Huge increases in real GDP growth have led to falling inflation, not rising inflation, just as they have now with Trump. And I get all of these Keynesians telling us, oh my God, we're going to get this huge increase in inflation because of demand. Nonsense. Demand for goods and services reduces inflation, it doesn't increase it. It lowers interest rates, it doesn't raise it. There you go.
So, on your years advising Reagan then, and also allegedly Thatcher, so you said that President Reagan was not naturally a tax cutter, that as a California governor, he was the state's biggest tax increaser. You've also said that he's learned from his mistakes. So how did Reagan, in your opinion, evolve, and what made him receptive ultimately to supply side ideas?
Yeah. Let me just say there are a lot of people who adore Reagan, such as I, who think Reagan was probably the greatest president ever. Maybe Donald Trump is. Now I'm talking just economics, David. Please make sure your audience understands I'm not talking about social policies or other stuff, all right? Just on economics, it's amazing what Reagan did. And these people want to deify Reagan, that it was somehow the individual and that he was born in a manger with a light shining down. That's not true. Reagan was raised in Dixon, Illinois. He went to Eureka College. All of this stuff. He wasn't elite in any way, shape, or form. He was a movie actor, and he was head of the Screen Actors Guild. And when he came into government in California after the Barry Goldwater speech, he was not a tax cutter. He was a tax increaser. He raised the highest state income tax rate from 7% to 11%. He raised the corporate rate to, I forget, one of the highest rates ever, I think 11%. From 9 to 11, he raised the sales tax rate dramatically. He raised property taxes. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was the biggest tax increaser. It was the slowest growth period of California's history. Mm-hmm. He increased government spending by 44%, and GDP only grew 24%. He was the perfect Keynesian taxer spender during that period. But what he also was he also was a person who was very disciplined. And I attribute this to his being raised by an alcoholic father, but whatever it is, he was extraordinarily disciplined. He really had a desire, every minute I was with him, a desire to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. He was perfectly dressed. I mean, if you never saw hair out of place on him, he is absolutely focused on perfection all the time. And the way he taught himself was at the end of each day, he would take out his big pad of paper and would write 2,500, 3,000 words about the events of the day. Wow. So we put it into paper. And as you know, the only way you can really be a good student is either teaching the subject or writing it down technically. You can't just sort of waffle your words. And he was so disciplined. Every night he did this. If you read Marty Anderson's book, Reagan in His Own Words, yeah. This is the whole private writings of Ronald Reagan, day in, day out, day in, day out. Here's what I did. Here's why I did it. Here's he did that every single day. So he taught himself from trial and error economics. And so he learned from his mistakes as governor. I mean, in his first term, he won the election from Edmund G. Pat Brown by about 1 million votes with a much smaller California. When he ran against Jesse Unruh in 1970, he won by 600,000 votes. The economy performed very badly there, and he went back and looked at all the things he did and came to the conclusion that what he did was wrong and it worked not to help the economy. And so he evolved. This was a time I was very involved with him. We had lunch together between 1976 and 1980, probably once a month at the Beverly Wilshire, just the two of us going through things with paper clips. And it was just amazing to see the education of Ronald Reagan coming through all this stuff and switching. He was the single worst governor in California's history and probably the single best president the U.S. has ever had. And he did that through his own self-education. Mm-hmm. I worked with him a lot on all of this stuff, and it was just amazing to see how...
You were on his economic policy advisory board for all 8 years. So what was your actual relationship with Reagan the man, not just Reagan the policymaker?
Well, my godfather was Reagan's best friend. And again, let me go back to harken back to my background. I got a lot of things in life through privilege. And my godfather was privileged there. Justin Dart was his name. And so I got to know Reagan and got to be very close to Reagan because of Justin Dart. That's why I got on the Economic Policy Advisory Board in his term in 1980. It was the kitchen cabinet plus me because I was the one willing to do all the notes, do the perspective. And so I got to know Reagan all that way on a personal level there. And, it was just amazing how on a personal level as well as a professional level, Reagan really did think things through very carefully, self-educated by writing all these things every single day. He was really disciplined. David, I can't begin to tell you how disciplined that man was. He never was sloppy. He never was badly dressed. He never was ill-spoken. He really, really focused on being excellent in everything he did.
Is that what it takes to succeed at the highest level? Because you've worked with so many successful people.
Yes, that is exactly what it takes.
Focus on detail, excessive focus on perfectionism.
Yes, it does, and that's why I stressed to you at the beginning why I made a vow never to take money from government again. Because once you take a job in government, you're an employee of that person. And when you get someone like Joe Biden or some of these other people, who are undisciplined, unprofessional, etc., all you're doing is sitting there covering their tush all day long, every day, from any type of whim or whims that they do. When you get people who are strongly disciplined, like Ronald Reagan, like Jack Kennedy, like Donald Trump, like even Bill Clinton was raised, as you may know, by an alcoholic father. Bill Clinton was very focused on being.
How does the discipline change compared to like President Reagan, President Trump, President Clinton? Like, do you see their distinct personalities coming through with that?
Yeah, but in all three of those cases, you see people who are really focused by being excellent. I mean, they really have a huge aversion to erring, to being wrong. They don't like. You can see that in Trump. I mean, you can see his personality clearly there. He doesn't want to be wrong, and he tries really, really hard to do the right thing. And the same thing was true with Reagan. All of Reagan's advisors, and I'm going to say all of them, and that's really the whole inner circle, except for maybe the speechwriters, were all advising Reagan nonstop to reverse his tax-cutting policies, to increase taxes, to go back in and control oil industry. They all did. He resisted every single one of those attempts. You hear people saying Reagan was great because he hired great people and he let them do their job. That's just acres and acres of soap suds and horse manure. All of his advisors, and I could go through every single one of them. I've got their memos. I've got the files on them all. They all wanted him to reverse his taxes and raise taxes much higher and be Keynesians. Conservative Keynesians, but Marty Feldstein especially, but David Stockman, Dick Darman, all of them were that way. And Reagan resisted all of those temptations and had to fight against his own staff to be able to do the policies he did. And it's just a huge testament to the desire this man personally had on doing the right thing. He did not allow himself the luxury of taking advice from the outside and not trying to challenge it and put it through a rigorous discipline. That's why he was so successful. Same thing with Lady Thatcher, by the way. This lady was really driven, and I don't know what caused her, and I knew her really, really well personally as well. She brought the highest tax rate down from over 90% down to 40%. I mean, she did the Maldives, the Malvinas, what you call what are the islands off the coast of South America? Argentina occupied the whatchamacallit, where she invaded and took the generals out. I mean, all this was her drive to be excellent. And she really wanted to do the right thing all the time, not to just get by, not to be kumbaya with people. She really wanted to make Britain great. Trump wants to make the U.S. great, and Ronald Reagan did too. And so did Jack Kennedy, and so did Bill Clinton. I mean, they were all great presidents in their own way. It's not Republican, Democrat. It's not liberal. It's conservative. It's not right-wing, left-wing. This is good economics. If you raise taxes on production and people, don't be surprised if you get less production and less people working. I mean, it's just straightforward, and I could take you through lots of individual conversations with Reagan, with Marty Feldstein, with these others, where, I'd be the only voice out in the skull, and I did not work in the White House. I'd come visiting with him, but then I'd go home at night. And, it's just, it's just so wonderful to see how Reagan was able to select based upon logic, not on number of people, oh my God, it's going to be a catastrophe. Milton Friedman saying we're going to have double-digit, triple-digit inflation. You're going to have the hyperinflation 80s. Nonsense. And Marty Feldstein always saying we need to raise taxes to balance the budget. That'll be the way of doing it. Nonsense. Who ever heard of an economy taxed into prosperity? It's stupid. Who ever heard of a poor person spending himself into wealth? That's just dumb. I mean, it's dumb. And these guys, that's what they said. And that's what they did. And they couched it on all this wonderful academic stuff. Crap, I say. But, being an academic myself, I was able to untie all that stuff and give it to Reagan straight, give it to Trump straight, to give it to, the others, Thatcher, very clearly.
So on Thatcher, you've been credited with advising Margaret Thatcher on fiscal policy, but I actually personally couldn't really find records of any specific meetings. So what exactly was that relationship? Was it direct advice to the Prime Minister, or were you kind of just broadly influencing the intellectual climate at the time?
I came over and had direct contacts with her during the whole period there with Sir Geoffrey Howe originally. I don't know if you remember Alan Walters, and then of course Geoffrey Howe. I didn't like him. She made me have dinner with him every couple times a year. I was not overly impressed with him. Sir Keith Joseph I met with a lot during the period of privatization there. Alan Walters, as you may remember, he was an advisor to Thatcher as well. Nigel, I really became much more when Geoffrey Howe left and Nigel Lawson came in. Now, this was not open big meetings where you had there. I met with her when she was just a member of Parliament before she was elected Prime Minister. I'm trying to think of his name, the London economist. I'll think of his name. I'm a little older now, but I'll get you his name. But I met with her. She was very dogmatic, very Reagan-esque in this thing of this. She wanted to do the right thing all the time. Now, she believed, like George Shultz did, like Richard Nixon did, that floating exchange rates was good. I had a major run-in with her and her cabinet in the period there, and I forget what year it was, 1967. They had pegged the pound to the German mark, and after she cut the tax rate was 60p, she dropped it to 40p. And when you do that, you create a huge investment opportunity in the UK. Everyone tries to invest in the UK. The only way outsiders, non-Brits, can invest in the UK is by the UK running a trade deficit, which is a capital surplus by the funds coming in. And only way you can get a capital surplus is if the terms of trade change. And if the terms of trade change, if you don't allow the exchange rate to be flexible under that circumstances, all of the adjustment of the terms of trade will occur through domestic inflation. Well, she pegged to the German mark, and when she did this, what happened is the inflation rate in Britain went up to double digit. Everyone says it was her tax, her poll tax that did it, but it wasn't. We had double digit inflation in Britain because she tried to peg to the British pound to the German mark, and did not allow the adjustment to take place by the huge appreciation of the British pound that should have happened. Same thing that happened in Ireland. When Ireland, was part of the euro, and we did the big tax cuts in Ireland. I was very involved in those as well. And you had double-digit inflation in Ireland, and they retracted a lot of the tax cuts. And the same thing happened with Thatcher in Britain. And, she was thrown out of office, but she had a great run. And, Reagan, thank God, allowed the dollar to appreciate to let the terms of trade happen without happening domestic inflation. So we were able to, from 78 to 1985, I think it was, the dollar doubled in value in the foreign exchanges, doubled. And so we were able to get dropping inflation and dropping interest rates and huge expansion of the U.S. economy and huge trade deficits as capital imports came into the U.S. If Britain had allowed the exchange rate to change during that period, it would have worked massively well for Thatcher. But she didn't. I lost that argument in the debates there. I lost it in Ireland too, by the way. I won it in the U.S.
I'd like to move on to your relationship with President Trump, which lots of people are very interested in. So in 2016, you got an urgent call from Trump's campaign manager. Trump started telling audiences that he got his tax ideas from the quote-unquote, the great Reagan economist Arthur Laffer. What was that first conversation like?
You're reading the press releases later on. It's yeah, the great call, the urgent. No, Donald Trump was running for president. He was a businessman there. Everyone knew who Donald Trump was. I had known him for a number of years, not well, but I had known him for a number of years because both of us were adopted by General Electric early in our careers. I was adopted at the University of Chicago and never let go. He was adopted by GE as well. They became his major funding and financier for the Trump buildings and Trump hotels and Trump casinos and all that stuff. And they had a great partnership. Leon Cooperman was another one, Jerry Parsky of Aurora Capital, Peter Uberoth with the hotels, and I could go on to Roy Disney with Disney. GE had done this with about 11 or 12 people and companies, and once they hook onto you, they didn't let you go. They set me up in my money management firm. They became a lot of the reason why I was successful financially during this whole period. And same thing with Donald Trump. They did that. And so I had met Donald Trump a number of times at fundraisers. When GE would have a cancer fundraiser, we'd both appear and give a contribution. And I'd met him and talked to him, and we'd say hello. We knew each other, but never sat down and talked. In fact, when he opened Jean Georges in New York, the restaurant there in New York, he poured me a glass of champagne there, and we were at the opening of the Lion King when Disney had the Lion. So I've known him over a long time, but never personally. I thought highly of him because GE liked him. So when he was running in 2016 for the Republican nomination, I decided to give Jack Welch, who was the head of GE, a call and ask him about Donald Trump. What's this guy like? And Jack told me, he said, look at Arthur, I have no idea what he'd be like as a good politician or not. I just don't know. But I can tell you as a business partner, he is the single best business partner General Electric has ever had. We have always made money and had great relationships with Donald Trump. We would do business with him every day of the week and twice on Sunday. He is just an excellent, excellent business partner. And that's all the recommendation I needed about Donald Trump. That here was his closest partner and friend, person I knew really, really well, gave that type of recommendation. It was about that time, maybe a little later, that I got the call from the guy from New Hampshire. I can't remember his name right at the, forgive me for that. But he called me and said Trump would like to get together. I did. I went with Trump. I met with him one-on-one. I met with his staff there, all that. And I spent a lot of time with him on what later became the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Mm-hmm. When Trump was running, the tax rate was 39.6, the income tax rate. When John F. Kennedy came into office, the marginal income tax rate was 91%. Slight difference, 39.6 versus 91. When Reagan came in, it was 70%. So with Kennedy and with Reagan, income tax rate cuts were the critical ones. But when it came to Donald Trump, the sore thumb, if you will, in my opinion, was the corporate tax. We were by far the highest corporate tax rate country in the developed world of the OECD. We were by far the highest, and that the biggest kick would come by lowering that rate from 34% to 21%, which is what I thought should be done. We did cut the income tax rate. We dropped it from 39.6 to 37. We did get rid of some other taxes as well, but the whole sort of Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and the one that was really important to me was the death tax. There's no tax that's more vulgar and more vile, more disruptive personal incentives than interceding between parents and their children, or between parents and their grandchildren. The death tax is you can earn your income here in the U.S. Fair and square, pay your taxes fair and square. You can take that money, you can go to Las Vegas, you can carouse, you can gamble, you can drink, and you can smoke. And as far as my federal government's concerned, it's your money. God bless you. Do with it as you will. Except if you give it to your kids or your grandkids, we're going to hammer you hard. I've never seen anything more disgusting and more disruptive than the inheritance tax. The closest one to it would be the capital gains tax, would be the corporate tax. These are of the big taxes. These are just the killers. So we dropped the death tax dramatically under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. We dropped the corporate rate from 34 to 21, dropped the personal income tax rate from 39.6 to 37. We dropped the death tax dramatically, and we also did 100% expensing of capital purchases, which is a huge dysfunction in the system there, because there's no indexing for investments. So those four together were massive engines of growth, and that's why Trump was so successful economically in his Tax Cuts and Jobs. We passed it in the fourth quarter of 2017. The U.S. had been growing it right along the way of Euroland, been every quarter for 2 years, been moving right together. All of a sudden the U.S. just goes boom and Euroland goes down. At the end of 2 years, our GDP was 2.5% higher than it would have been had we grown at Euroland growth rates. Not only that, tax revenues grew dramatically in the 2 years following the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Total federal tax revenues were much higher than they had been in the prior 2 years. And in fact, more than the prior 2 years had been relative to the 2 years prior to that. Unemployment rates of the poor, the minorities, the disenfranchised, all were at the lowest rates ever. I mean, all of the poverty rates in the U.S. I mean, it was one of the most successful, absolutely spectacular bills. It paid for itself in the first 2 years, and it led to enormous growth. And you try to debate these other people, my colleagues, and they're unwilling to debate it because they know the facts. The facts are against them, so they use shouting and screaming rather than facts. But that Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was spectacular. And I could go on and on with that. But I worked with him on that. And then coming into this next one, we made the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent. We got rid of the tax on overtime. I mean, here you've got these people fighting fires in California, David. They're working 80 hours a week, or fighting the Twin Towers that's just exploded in 9/11. And you've got all these volunteers, policemen and firemen going in there to all this working all these hours. Do you think you should really tax them at really high rates because of this absolutely egregious capitalist working? You know, when you have that Palestine, Ohio train derailed with all the poisonous gases coming out, all these volunteer workers came in there. They came in and worked overtime, and they were paid. Donald Trump wanted to lower that tax rate so to get people to be willing to work that extra hour to really make it for the people, the society. So that's what he did. I mean, we also worked. Why on earth would you ever tax tips? I mean, do you know how difficult it is to get tips from waitresses and waiters? And you know, they take it in cash. You spend $1 million collecting $100,000. That makes no sense whatsoever. And if interest income is going to be taxed, interest expense must be deductible. That should be the way it should be done. Does that sound? You know, I don't know if my mic is. Maybe that's a little bit better. You can hear better. But you see what I'm saying there? That's what I thought on that. He made 100% expensing of capital purchase. I think what he did in the big, beautiful bill was wonderful. He had requirements put in for health, for welfare. I mean, you know, work requirements. I mean, if you're able-bodied, why should you get paid welfare? If you can work, why should you? I mean, you want to incentivize people to work, not. Let me ask you the question this way. What do you think is better for the economy? Giving money to people who don't work, or reducing tax rates on people who do work? Come on, help me. If you tax people who work, and you pay people who don't work, do not be surprised if there are a lot of people not working. Duh. And that's economics. And these other people think that a government can spend you into prosperity. I mean, it's just silly. Everyone knows that transfer recipients will spend more. They all know that. Everyone knows that. That's the Keynesian model. But they also know that transfer payers will spend less. The income effects of a government transfer payment always sum to zero. That's the Slutsky equation, for Christ's sake. Everyone understands, but the substitution effects aggregate. Let's imagine we had 100% of GDP spent to stimulate the economy, 100%, so that everyone who worked and produced received nothing, and all those who didn't work and didn't produce received everything. What do you think would happen to GDP? It would go to zero. Ah, I'm so tired of Keynesians. They just, I mean, I wish they'd learn their math. But no, 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 they have to keep on going with this silly stuff. And counter to all the evidence. I mean, look at the performance of the Reagan economy. Look at the performance of the Thatcher economy. Look at the performance of the Kennedy economy. Look at the performance of the Trump economy. I mean, versus, let's say, Biden, or versus, let's say, Obama, or versus, let's, ba-da-doop-ba-da-deep.
Did you have a personal relationship with President Biden and President Obama? Did you work with
No,
them?
no, I did not. Austin Goolsbee tried to get me in to see Obama. Austin Goolsbee is a phenomenally good economist, by the way, University of Chicago, Yale, same background. I am only 40 years younger. He's now head of the Chicago Fed. He's really a very good economist. His research work is really good. He tried to get me in there to meet with Obama several times, did interviews, talked to me, but in the end, Valerie Jarrett did not think it would be appropriate to have me meet with Obama, so I didn't.
Do you wish you had the meeting? What would you have
Yeah, I'd
told
love to.
President Obama?
Look, I'm not Republican or Democrat. I've worked with as many Democrats, if not more. I was Jerry Brown's economist when he ran
Well,
for
you
president.
voted for Bill Clinton twice, right?
Yeah, I loved it. I voted for Bill Clinton. He thought I was awful, but I thought he was wonderful. So I don't care what he thinks of me. I thought he did a very good job. He cut government spending as a share of GDP dramatically. He passed NAFTA. I mean, how wonderful that is. He cut tax rates across. Do you realize he got rid of the capital gains tax on owner-occupied homes? He personally, under his presidency, did that. I mean, you know, that's half the capital stock in America is owner-occupied homes. So I'm a huge fan of Bill Clinton's. He claimed that I caused the Great Recession and all that stuff. He can say anything about me he wants. I thought he was a great president.
You've also called President Trump the greatest president in history, bar none. But you've also said that President Trump's tariffs are, quote unquote, the most scary influx economic moment of your life. And you said you don't know how anyone who could argue how protectionism doesn't create downturns. So how do you hold both views simultaneously? And looking back, how do you interpret the tariffs?
Yeah, this is an important, and I hope you don't mind me going a little bit of time on this.
Go, no, please.
I'm a trade economist. That's my dissertation was in trade. I taught pure trade theory. That's the most mathematical of the economics fields there. And I'm very much into this. And there is no ambiguity, period, that protectionism is a prosperity killer. In the fourth quarter of 1929, the House and the Senate passed the Smoot-Hawley tariff. It was signed into law in June of 1930. It led to the Great Depression. I could go on a great deal with you. My colleague Bob Mundell in his Nobel laureate speech said it was the Smoot-Hawley tariff that caused the Great Depression, and it was the Great Depression that caused World War II. He's right. That's pretty bad. I was in the Nixon White House from 70 to 72 when Nixon put on the 10% import surcharge. He had the job development credit, which excluded foreign-made capital. It was purely protectionism there all the way, and it led to a horrible economy following that, clearly. I also was around when we passed NAFTA, which was a reduction in tariffs that led to the go-go 80s. I was there when they got rid of the Kennedy round tariff negotiation, which led to the go-go 60s. So no matter how you slice it or dice it, broad-based protectionist legislation is a prosperity killer, and cutting tariffs, I want all of us to understand the background of those data. Are you with me? This is my expertise area, and anyone who tells you protectionism helps the economy is wrong. And anyone who tells you that cutting tariffs and protectionism doesn't help the economy, they're wrong. Period. And the evidence, the theory, all supports it. The gains from trade, from Ricardian gains from trade, as well as the Alexander gains from trade, are huge. They led to the enormous prosperity of America in the long run. I mean, I could go on and on. Now, today, there are three things very different today than were around in the 1930s or even in the 1950s, even in the 1980s. Today, we have the use of protectionism or tariffs in executive orders. Donald Trump can in one day put a tariff on country one's automobiles and 2 days later remove it. Using of executive orders makes trade policy very, very flexible. Historically, it was totally rigid and immovable. It took years to pass trade legislation, and it took years to undo it. Now you can do it in an hour twist. So it's a very flexible tool that it wasn't, number one. Number two, there's something called leverage. Back in the day when the U.S., before World War II, we were like every other country. After World War II, the U.S. allowed all these other countries to put on protectionist barriers to develop infant industries, and we never required them to remove it. So right now, the U.S. is by far the freest trade big country in the world, and this is what we call reciprocity. We are by far the freest trade world. All these other countries, are much more protectionist than we are because we allowed them to do so after World War II. And I commend my country for doing that. That was really gracious of us. It was the right thing to do. But then we should have had it removed later when they became prosperous. That didn't happen. The last thing I want to go to you is I want to not only go to reciprocity, flexibility, but I want to talk about leverage, which is a big difference than it had been prior to World War II. The U.S. today is the elephant in the living room. And if the two countries in the world were two countries that existed, were the U.S. and Puerto Rico, and I'm going to use that example, where the U.S. is 99% of the world, Puerto Rico is 1%. Imagine we have a free trade world between the U.S. and Puerto Rico. Their exports are our imports, our exports are their imports, our trade deficit is their trade surplus, all properties of prices are all equilibrated, everyone's getting the gains from trade. Bump, 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 okay? Now the U.S. puts on a tariff. If the U.S. puts on a tariff, there are no winners. The U.S. loses and Puerto Rico loses. But they don't lose the same amount, David, because 99% of all the customers of U.S. businesses are Americans, and because 99% of all Puerto Rican customers are also Americans, not Puerto Ricans, the damage done by protectionism hurts both countries. That's true. But it hurts the U.S. a lot less than it does Puerto Rico. So we have three things today that are very different: flexibility, leverage, and reciprocity. You follow me? And these are totally different than have existed any time. Trump is a master negotiator. He understands how to use negotiation. It's really hard to use domestic tax policy to get Russia to stop fighting in Ukraine. It's just not going to work. But trade policy will. Trump knows how to use these. He understands. When I take you through the damage that can be done by trade, Trump understands that totally. I can assure you that he does. Not only do I know it, that he understands it from his conversations with me, but from my conversations with him. I have never held back an ounce of any of the stuff I just told you. I'm fully...
How does President Trump, in your conversations with him, pitch his ideas, especially when people seem to disagree? Like, how does he sell himself and his ideas when it comes to these?
I don't know how he sells himself to others, and you'll have to look at that. He's been pretty successful. He is, after all, the president. But with me, he tells me, he says, Arthur, the U.S. is the freest trade country. How do I get these foreign countries to come to the negotiation table to cut their tariffs and their quotas and their non-tariff barriers? How do I get them to the table? They don't give a damn. All they care about is access to the U.S. market. So what do? I go in there and say, I'm going to put on 50% tariffs, 100%, 200% tariffs. They go, ah! And then they come to the negotiating table, and we then can negotiate freer trade. Or then we can negotiate peace in Ukraine. Or then we can negotiate peace in the Gaza. Or then we can negotiate peace in 4 countries in Africa. We can Pakistan, Afghanistan, peace deals. All of those, Trump uses tariffs to negotiate peace deals there. If you are on our side and if you act like a good person, we'll cut your tariffs down dramatically and we'll both get rich together. If, on the other hand, you don't, we're going to build up our defenses and it's called peace through strength, which is Ronald Reagan's peace through strength. He uses tariffs and quotas and non-tariff barriers to negotiate these people to do the right thing. If you looked at the 5 major treaties we did during Trump's first term in office, the first one was USMCA. The United States, Mexico, and Canada. All right? That lowered tariffs, that lowered quotas, that lowered non-tariff barriers. It did. It was freer trade. We did the one with Japan. That again lowered tariffs, lowered non-tariff barriers. We did it with South Korea. That did it there too. They lowered tariff barriers. It was freer trade. We did it with Brazil and with Colombia as well. The 5 deals he did in his first term all were freer trade, not less trade. He uses the threat of tariffs to negotiate a reduction in tariff barriers for everyone. He uses the threat of tariffs to negotiate peace deals in Ukraine, in Gaza, in Africa, in Asia. I mean, this guy is a master negotiator. What I believe, he understands this subject matter inside out, backward, forward, upside down, and every which way. He does understand the damage that a guy like Biden would do in there and would create a depression. He understands how to use tariffs eloquently and properly to get good results. He understands the flexibility, the leverage, and the reciprocity. And those are 3 new traits of trade that did not exist back in the 80s. They just didn't. And so I commend him enormously for using trade tools to achieve world objectives, not just U.S. He is America first. That's true. That's what he says all the time. But he's also very pro the world. He's not wanting the rest of the world last. It's not us making money and them going bankrupt. It's we need to make money and the rest of the world needs to be making money along with us. We're first, but boy, is the rest of the world a close second in becoming prosperous. And I can't tell you how pleased I am with the way he has used trade policies, not to be a protectionist, but to be a free trader. Not to be a warmonger, to be a pacifist. I just love it. And it's exactly the way Reagan did. We used NAFTA to bring in trade, aggrandizement of the world. As you know, it was under Reagan that we got NAFTA. It wasn't until Bill Clinton that we really passed it. That's why I love Clinton. And we were able to do peace through. We won the Third World War, David, without fighting. How cool is that? We drove the rest of the world into peace by U.S. economic growth, by cutting tax rates, by decontrolling energy, by having freer trade. I mean, that was what Reagan did, was peace through strength. And that's exactly what Donald Trump's doing. Now, if you have a problem with peace, if you like nuclear war, I can see the argument to you. But if you like peace, if you like prosperity for all peoples on this earth, I suggest you really look at prosperity through growth. And that's the reason, and that's exactly what Trump is doing, and that is exactly what Ronald Reagan did. And that's what John F. Kennedy did. That was the Kennedy round tariff negotiation. Kennedy achieved peace through growth.
Just before we get on to your new book, Prosperity Through Growth, you've mentioned President Biden a few times. Could you kind of share your views on his presidency and his major decisions, like the Inflation Reduction Act, for example, or just how he built his career?
I will. Joe Biden, really honestly, I don't know this from detail, but he seems like a very fine man, a very good guy. Obviously, he loves his family a lot. He's gone through a lot of tragedy in life. He lost his first wife and his child there. He lost his second son with cancer later. I mean, this is a very empathetic, fine man personally, but he is not capable or qualified to be president. And there are a lot of people in this world who are not qualified to be the leader of the free world. He's just doesn't have it.
Because of age or just because of general?
No, it's not age. It's just he doesn't understand policy. He plays politics very well. So does Nancy Pelosi. They all do. Nancy Pelosi thinks we could stimulate the economy by doubling unemployment benefits. That's what she said. I mean, and she believes that. These people are not trained. They're not qualified. They don't come from the background of people who really understand what it takes to make for a great country and a great world and a peaceful country and a peaceful world. And those are the people that bother me the most. And it's not because they're bad people. They aren't bad people. They just don't know what they're doing. And they are so ensconced. They want to be there no matter what happens. And what I want is, I want people to see something that happens no matter who's there. Bill Clinton was a great president of the U.S. Jerry Brown would have been one of the greatest presidents the U.S. had ever had, a left-wing Democrat. The bills we had, the Graham-Latta, were all Democrat-sponsored. With Reagan, we made damn sure that every one of the sponsors was a Democrat, split Republican, Democrat. I was Gary Hart's economist when he ran for president in '88. I was one of several, but I was Democrat then, but not Democrat in the party. I worked with Republicans as well as Democrat. If I don't give a damn if you're trans, you believe in God or don't believe in God. If you like tax cuts, I'm on your side. You got a place at my table. I'm not into these other issues. I'm only into economics. And Joe Biden did not understand economics and thought it was all politics. Donald Trump does understand politics, and he understands economics, and he really does a great job in economics. And if you look at it, whether it be taxes, government spending, monetary policy, regulatory policy, or trade, or peace through strength, any one of those 6 areas, he's done a great job. And so did Ronald Reagan. And by the way, Bill Clinton was pretty damn good too. And Margaret Thatcher was pretty good. And I'm really after results, not your party label.
So on the economic side, the one of the most difficult part of me as an interviewer is balancing that dual responsibility of, on the one hand, facilitating the conversation and ensuring that you get the chance to share your perspective, while on the other hand, probing boundaries. So I'm just going to move to
boundaries. Go for it.
I'm just going to move to the Kansas experiment. So Kansas had paid you, $75,000. You called the plan truly revolutionary and predicted enormous prosperity. The revenue dropped $700 million annually. School funding was ruled unconstitutional. A Republican legislation also overrode the governor to reverse the cuts. So when asked about it, you said, "When your biggest criticism of me is Kansas, I mean, come on. What would you say to the teachers who left Kansas, or the students who face funding cuts, and what?" Yeah.
First place, the first part of one part of your quote there is, I never did say this was revolutionary. With respect, I did say it was good policy. I did say that. I had nothing to do with the policy. I came in long after it was legislation.
Yep.
I didn't come in beforehand. I came in at the request of the governor, Sam Brownback. Now, I am in the private sector. I'm not a professor. I don't have some huge institution supporting me. I don't. I have to live by what I kill. I need to get paid for my work, and otherwise I wouldn't be paid. So I was paid the $75,000. That is correct. And that's what I came in and looked at it. He could not get the bill passed. I looked at the Senate, hated Sam Brownback, and I worked with the senators and with Sam Brownback to try to get some sort of legislation through. It is not the legislation I would do. As you can see, I did California's Prop 13. I've done something like 15 states' economic policies. Kansas is the smallest, most irrelevant of the states that I've worked with. So, to pick one example and say, that's Art Laffer, all it's not true. And I didn't do it. I came in afterwards, and I've got a write-up of it, which I would be more than happy to share with you, because I kept the chronology of everything at the time, not thinking I would ever need it for this purpose. But I've got it. And I can go through all the results there. Number one, it was a very teeny tiny tax bill. It was in the right direction. It was about a $50 million tax cut. There he had a sales tax increase and an income tax rate reduction that was very small. It was minor. And then what happened is the Senate, which had, for a reason there, got rid of the sales tax. There was a $270 million tax bill now, not $50 million. He had a choice of vetoing it or not. He did not veto it. He signed it. That was his choice. I had nothing to do with that or anything. And then the thing came in you talked about the school thing there. You're very right. The Constitution found it. So he had to spend $1 billion. I had nothing to do with the legislation or the judicial adjudication on school budgets at all. Just for the record, I didn't. That was $1 billion there that they had to put into the school funding. And that was out of the blue. So if you want, I'd be glad to share with you, and I'll do that right now with you, my write-up of Kansas there. But Kansas, I didn't have anything to do with it. It was his bill. I said it was better than nothing, and they got all of this stuff come down. If anyone wants a full prescription of what actually happened, I'd be more than happy to share it. But that's all they got against me. The other one they had against me was Iceland. What? Iceland is like Kansas. Kansas is the most immaterial state in the nation. They're all oil and wheat. I mean, there's no industry there. Come on, tell me about New York. Tell me about California. Tell me about my work in Prop 13. Tell me about the 9 states that have no income tax versus the others. Tell me about Connecticut. All these other ones that I've worked on way more than Kansas. But they choose Kansas, and they're wrong on their analysis of it. But that's their problem, not my problem. If you look at the Iceland one, it's crazy. I mean, can you tell me what the second largest city in Iceland is? There isn't one. Iceland is 300,000 people, and that was my crime. I did all the other. I mean, give me a break. The reason they go after these things, they have nothing else. And I'd be glad to debate Kansas with anyone who wants to, if that's what they wish to focus their attention on. But I'd much rather have you see the things I've done with income taxes, what I've done with Prop 13 in California, which is the big driver for a 10-year period of extraordinary growth and prosperity in California. All the ones I've done here in Tennessee, gotten rid of the gift and estate tax, we got rid of the unearned income tax. Look at what happened in Connecticut and think it'd be lovely to have to go through those, but no. They want to talk about Kansas. I'll be glad to talk about Kansas, but if you want something serious, let's do all the other stuff, which has been enormously successful, as you can see if you read the book, Prosperity Through Growth.
I appreciate it. Just on this kind of thread around the criticisms that you've received publicly, you had also in October 2022 endorsed Liz Truss's mini budget, and obviously she lasted 44 days. So at what point do you think empirical failures actually challenge the underlying theory? And how do you...
Well, that would, if she'd ever gotten to put any of her policies in. But as you know, Liz Truss never got the tax cuts, never got anything there. Kwasi Kwarteng's bill was really spectacular, and I think would have been very good for the economy.
But the fact that she didn't get to put her policy in suggests that,
bad
the theory
politics.
didn't account.
It wasn't bad economics. I'm just economics. I'm not politics. I think she handled the politics of that very badly, and it never got put in, and she got thrown out of office, and it was. But that has nothing to do with the economics. She should I mean, I don't know. I don't want to give anyone political advice. I'm not. But the economic policies that Kwasi had developed there, and that was with the trust budget, would have been extraordinarily beneficial for the UK. I mean, it really would have been, but it never was put into place. And you can't judge my economics by the economics that was never put in. I mean, that's not worth the paper it was not written on. You know that old phrase, it's not worth the paper that it was not written on? It never came into play. Now, Thatcher did. You can accuse me of bad economics if you look at Thatcher and find that she did a bad job.
This economics and politics distinction that you mentioned is also quite interesting, because in 1986 you actually ran for Senate in California, right, where you proposed giving 15,000 tax-free grants for top students and bonuses to star teachers, which is, I guess, classic supply-side thinking applied to education. What did you learn from that campaign about the difference between advising politicians and actually being the one where you have to navigate the politics as well?
Yeah, I learned two things. I learned one, I should never run for office. Just for your audience sake, I got less votes in the Senate primary than the adult members of my family. Yeah, just joking. I learned what I don't do, and that's not what I do. I'm not the guy who should be on the front line. I just should not. But I also learned out a little bit of what it's like being on the front line, understanding the pushes and pulls and problems that actual politicians face. Now, when you sit there with Reagan or with Thatcher or with Clinton or with Donald Trump or with the others, Jerry Brown or the others, and I've lost a lot of battles as well, by the way. But sitting there, you're not as keenly aware of the limitations of your advice as to when you are really a politician. Now, with Donald Trump, and I say this to everyone, and I'll say it to you and your audience as well. When I go to Donald Trump, I recognize he is the policymaker. I am not. My role with him, my role with Reagan, my role with Thatcher was purely and simply to provide them with information and analysis that would help them make good decisions. Help them make good decisions. I'm not the decision maker, and I'm not someone who says, you should do that. I'm not that type of guy. I'm the guy who says, here's what we know from economics. I know this is pertinent to the stuff you do. And if this information is helpful to you in making better decisions, please. But I'm not here to judge you. In fact, I begged Reagan and I begged Donald Trump not to tell me what they were thinking when I talked with them, because I don't want the burden of knowing what their thoughts are when I talk to someone like you. I mean, what's Donald Trump think of this? I don't want to tell you. And if I don't know, I can't tell you. So this is how I treat myself. I am one of many advisors to a president, but he's the guy who makes the decision. And I go home at night and I go to bed and I don't worry about making bad decisions. These people have voluntarily chosen to become presidents of the United States or prime ministers of the UK or congressmen or senators, wherever the hell they are. They voluntarily did that. I tried once. I learned this is something I never want to ever do again. I don't want to ever live in Washington, D.C. I never want to take a government position. I took no position at all during Reagan's whole presidency. I was on the President's Economic Policy Advisory Board, but that's a non-paid advisory committee. That's all it was. And I saw the president a lot separately. But my whole thing is, I am just here to help you make a better decision, not to make the decision for you. So please don't tell me what your thoughts are, and please don't put me in an awkward situation. And it's like the ones in Kansas you talk about. I'm not there to make the decisions for Sam Brownback, who was governor. He says he had a tax bill there, and it had already passed and been put into policy. What did I think of it? Well, if I'm going to go down there and spend a week with him, which I did twice, 3 times, I've got to get paid. I can't have no income. So I charged $75,000. It may be high for you or not high, but it's not. I charged it. Yes, I did, and I went through that. I wouldn't have done it this way. I would have done that. But on balance, is it a good bill? Yeah, it is a good bill. And the whole thing of the Senate and the governor were at huge odds with each other, and it wasn't until they were able to flip the Senate that Brownback was able to get control of his state. So, that's what I do in my advice, and that's true with all the governors, with all the state, federal, etc. I'm just an economist, but I'll give you good economics, or at least what I think is good economics. And if you choose to take it, fine. If you choose not to, fine. I'm not here pushing a plan. You follow me?
I do. So your new book, if we go to Prosperity Through Growth, then, warns that Britain will slide from 30th to 48th in global GDP per capita by 2050, overtaken by Poland and Turkey. You've interviewed 5 former British prime ministers and 9 former chancellors.
Plus. I mean, 10, 15 others as well, all in the head of the central bank and all that stuff. Yeah, we did that.
So for those who haven't read the book, in your words, what did you learn from them about why Britain struggles to grow that perhaps you didn't even appreciate just through theory alone?
I learned a lot. I spent a lot of time. I've always been a big fan of Tony Blair's. But with the interview with Tony Blair, I came to really respect him enormously. Just for the record, I've always was a fan of Blair's, but I'm carrying his flag. But there, the part of the book that is really Arthur Laffer was the very first section there. Art Laffer's 5 North Stars for Economic Growth. The rest of it there are 3 other co-authors, each of whom brought in Briticisms into this thing, and I let me put it this way. I would not have worded much of that second part the way this is done, although I support it there. I think the second part of the book is much more the policy stuff there that I'm not the expert on, David, in Britain especially. But when I look at that book and when I look at what's doing, one thing sticks out, if I may, in my mind about Britain. Someone told me, and it's true, I've checked it, it's true, that on average, once every week, there is a country in this world that celebrates their independence from Great Britain. Let me say that again. On average, once every week, there is a country that celebrates its independence from Great Britain. That includes my country, Britain, Canada, all these other countries. That quote tells you 2 things. It tells you, one, how bad things have become, but it also tells you how great things once were. Britain was the preeminent country on planet Earth. It really was. The Industrial Revolution was British. Adam Smith was British. David Ricardo was British. I mean, this is all, Britain was the sine qua non of industrialization, of prosperity on planet Earth. It no longer is, David. It has shrunk dramatically. I looked at, in that first section there, I looked at British real GDP per adult, how it's declined. That's where we got the forecast of if things don't change. I look at all this stuff as Britain is a country that has been seized by a malaise that is they can't get out of. Everyone knows, everyone who's got a lick of sense in their head knows how to get Britain out of this. All of our interviews, and the reason we went through all of these interviews is everyone understands what we talk about in that book, the regulations, the taxes, all of the understanding, the leaving of the industrialists, the welfare system, the whole thing. They all understand it. It is a generic problem that the elephant in the living room cannot be gotten rid of in Britain. Keir Starmer, who is a fine guy, he's very articulate, but they can't get rid of that elephant in the living room. They can't do what needs to be done. When I look at Britain, I sit there and see, it makes my heart cry. I love no country more except the U.S. than I do Britain. I just love the country. And I watch them all kowtow to the bad economics and just hope that something good happens. What Rachel Reeves has done is not going to lead to prosperity. I'll tell you that, it's not. No matter how many times they say it will, wishful thinking is not a plan. And what you need to do in Britain to get the economic growth, I believe, based on the evidence I have in that book, needs to low rate, broad-based, flat tax, spending restraint, sound money, minimal regulations, free trade, and peace through strength. You need to decontrol the oil sector in Britain. Britain is the highest energy cost country around, and it's got tons of energy. The reason it's not is because of all the regulations. And there's no way of getting this back. Your schools are dropping dramatically. You know that. Everyone knows that. The unemployment, the poverty, the despair. That's my message to Britain. Mm-hmm. And if you like my advice, if you like my analysis there, God bless you. If you don't, throw me out of the country. I tell everyone I go to Indonesia. I did the same thing in Indonesia. I was there for a series of lectures. And one of the Indonesian politics took offense at what I said. And she attacked me, big ba-ba-ba, and attacked me by... she did the Kansas and she did the other stuff, and she did it. I said, look, I'm not a politician of your country. I'm not even an Indonesian. I'm not. I'm an economist who loves your country and who loves humanity. If I have something to offer to you that helps you, God bless you. It's yours for free. It's yours. I'll even come in and help you do this. There. If you don't like me, just ask me to leave. I'm out of there. I'll go home to my little house in Tennessee with my dogs, my animals, my kids, and my grand, and I'll live a very nice life without Indonesia. But if there is something I can do to better this world, if I can, and I went to Pakistan with Imran Khan, as you may know, and Shaukat Tareen, and Arez, I can't remember his name, the finance minister there. I did that with them. If I have something to offer to you, if I have something to offer to you students there at the Oxford Union, please, if you want to yell and scream at me, I'll give you a picture. Let you scream at me, throw poo-poo at it, or all you want. I'm not here to prove something to you. I'm 85 years old. I'm not building a resume anymore. I've had my debates in the profession. You look at my resume. You look at my papers. You look at my successes and failures. You tell me what you think. I'm not here to sell a bundle of goods to you. Here's my career, here's my research, here's my work, here's what I've done. Did you like what Reagan did? Did you like what Thatcher did? Do you like what Trump did? Do you like what Kennedy did? Did you like what we did in Argentina? Did you like what under Menem? Did you like what we're doing now with Milei? Did you like what we did with Sergio de Castro and Ralph Luders in Argentina? I was down there with them. They were all my students back there. When Pinochet took office and Allende left office, I was there. And I mean, if you like, in El Salvador today with Bukele, I'm working with lots of countries, lots of states. If you like it, I'm here to serve you. If you don't like it, just tell me to go home. I'll go home without yelling at you, or you don't need. You with me? I'm here to help you guys at Oxford and at Cambridge and in Britain, not to doctrinally brainwash you. I could give a goddamn what your economics is, period. I'm here to say, I've done this and this and this. Can I help you make better decisions in your future?
So
Thanks.
one of the things about that we as students currently are navigating as early career professionals is the impact of AI. Your book argues that AI makes economic incentives even more important because talented people become more mobile. How does AI change the Laffer curve itself? And if productivity explodes due to technology, does that change where the optimal tax rate hits or sits? Or do you have any general thoughts around AI?
Now, your people on the podcast here and will probably know I'm 85. I just got rid of my flip phone. I don't know how to use these telephones there. I don't do emails. I write all of my books cursive. I don't use a computer.
You don't type?
No. I do type, but I'm a hunt and pecker, if you know what I mean. I can't do a book that way. I've always written all my books out longhand and then had my office type them up and then do the drafts and all that. So when anyone there in your office or anyone in Britain thinks that I introduced AI into the title of that book, knows that that's the other three authors are much more expert at AI than I am. But economics is economics. The Industrial Revolution didn't change economics. The Y2K did not change economics. I doubt very much that AI will change economics. It will change all sorts of outcomes, that's true. But it won't change the basic response to incentives. And that human beings are an incentive-driven animal. And if you can realign those incentives to reward excellence and to discourage things, why do we tax speeders on the freeway in London? To get them to stop speeding, correct? Why do we tax cigarettes, combustible tobacco products? To get people to stop smoking. Why do we tax alcohol? Because of the externalities of drunkenness, and that to get people to stop drinking so much. All right? That's in the same breath. Why do we tax people who earn income? Why do we tax people who invest and make high returns on productivity? Why do we tax people who employ other people? We do not tax them on their income to earn less income. We don't. We don't tax them to hire less people. We don't. We don't tax profitable companies so that we get all sorts of unprofitable companies making crappy products at high cost using a lot of lobbyists. We don't. But we tax these people to make the revenues to run government. And that's a perfectly, but don't for a moment think that the same consequences will not occur as occurs when you tax speeders, tax smokers, and tax drinkers. These people will stop earning income or will earn less income than they otherwise would have. Will stop employing other people. Believe me, when you drive that wedge between them, that is what. All I want to do is make all of you guys aware of the economics, that what you're doing with regard to these things, like climate change and all that, they have economic consequences. You may find it well worthwhile, and I did a whole lot of work with Al Gore, as you probably know. I noticed you never mentioned my work with Al Gore. But, it makes perfect sense to me that there's been global warming in the last century and a half. It makes perfect sense to me that has been in part caused by the Industrial Revolution and the hydrocarbons and CO2 in the environment. It makes perfect sense to me that way. And if you were to ask me to push me to the wall, you look at type 1 and type 2 errors. What is the chance that we have not enough carbon dioxides in the environment? And we need to burn a lot more hydrocarbons to create a lot more CO2. What are the chances that would be beneficial? And very, very low. What are the type 2 errors? What are the chances that we have too much hydrocarbon CO2 in the atmosphere there, and that we should reduce the amount of CO2 in the environment? Very high. That's the trade-off there. So I think the type 2 errors are very low, and the risk of type 1 errors are very high. So with that in mind, it makes perfect sense to me that we should put on a carbon tax for combustible carbon. It makes perfect sense to me. But when I look at the carbon tax and ask myself, what's the downside of the carbon tax? The downside of a carbon tax, it'll destroy the economy. And it will. So what do I and Al Gore come to as a compromise? What I come to as a compromise with Al Gore is we should put on a carbon tax and offset that carbon tax with either a payroll tax rate reduction or an income tax reduction of static equal size. Then you offset the damage done to the economy by having the income tax rate reduction and by having the payroll tax rate reduction with a carbon tax, so it's not a net tax increase and won't destroy the economy, and it will shift the relative prices of combustible hydrocarbons and clean the air and keep prosperity going. Does that sound like something reasonable to you? That's what Art Laffer does with Al Gore. Now, the only difference I had with Al Gore is he wanted to be a payroll tax cut and I wanted to be an income tax cut. So we split the difference. Half of it would be income tax and half of it would be payroll tax. And you can find that in my New York Times article. I mean, when you're going to do social policies that are not strictly, use economics cleverly. Don't use carbon credits and blah, 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 do and California stupidity after stupidity. Just do a very simple carbon. And only tax the combustible carbon. We need to get all sorts of oil to use as fertilizer into place. It does, all the fertilizer comes from oil. It's only when you burn it that you create the CO2. Okay, you follow me? So therefore make sure you're very precise in what you're rewarding and what you're not rewarding. That's why I love the Philip Morris
logic. I guess we're now in higher education. Do you think that logic of awarding things based on incentive works for the higher education sector and the mess that we're seeing?
That's why I did the Excellence Awards that you quoted earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, what I think should be done is far from being, I do not disagree with school choice. I don't think it's a very efficient solution. But what I would like to see is the U.S. Now, I can't speak about Britain, but I'd like to see the 21st Century Excellence Award. Every kid in the top 5% of the SAT scores. Let's give them all SAT scores. Everyone in the top 5%, give them $15,000 tax-free, no strings attached. Bing. Everyone in the second 5%, give them $7,500 tax-free, no strings attached. Can you imagine what that would do to the incentives to be in the top 5%? You'd have grandma sitting there tutorial all these kids, tiger moms all over the place. You know, the purpose of education is to get educated kids. And how do you get educated products? By rewarding people for the education they achieve. That's what you do. You don't, reward them for being at school. You don't reward them for any of this other stuff. You reward them for excellence in education. You follow me? I don't care if it's private school or public school, whatever it is. If you get in the top 5% of these test scores, and I'm using that illustratively, by the way. You know I'm using it illustratively. And the same thing's true of politicians. If politicians make a lot of money, and believe me, they all do, David. They all do. They're sitting on gobs of money. They're going to be rich when they leave office. Just face it. I don't mind them making money in government, as long as I do too. So my whole thing with politicians is they shouldn't be given a salary. They should be paid on commission. If the economy grows at 3%, they get their pay. If it grows at 4%, you get double their pay. Grows at 5%, they get triple their pay. Grows at 2%, David, no pay this year. Grows at 1%, they owe us the money they would have been paid. You need to incentivize politicians to do the right thing, to make money by doing the right thing, not by just making money through graft and corruption. If you think you're ever going to get non-corrupt politicians, you've got your head in a cloud that I don't understand. Use the incentives to achieve what you want to achieve. Don't always sit there, no, that's wrong. There's nothing wrong with being rich. There's something very wrong with being poor. The dream in this world is to make the poor rich, not to make the rich poor. There's nothing wrong with being well off. That's why I said everyone should have privilege, not just Art Laffer. I know how much privilege has given me in my life. And I want it to be given to you too, David, and to all the others. It's not taking it away from me that makes other people well off. It's granting them the privilege to make them well. And we can do that with incentives across the board. Reward successful people who achieve educational success. Well, you see where I'm going. Balance up, not down. That's why I wrote enterprise zones. We want tax-free zones in the inner city of the U.S. Here are people who are in terrible desperation. They get all these welfare payments. All right, all of them get on welfare. And as soon as they earn some income, what happens? They lose their welfare. They have effective tax rates of over 100% in there. It's a poverty trap. We're keeping the poor in the inner cities in those traps. Get rid of those incentives. Make them tax-free zones. Use incentives to elect. They're not stupid people. They're not bad humans. They're not dumb. Their brain structure is just as good as yours and mine. They just are given a horrible incentive structure that keeps them located in poverty and keeps them looking for success in ways that you and I find offensive. Robbing, stealing. Why are there so many professional athletes are from the inner cities? Because it's the only way they can get out. Why are so many criminals from the inner cities? Because it's the only way they can get out. Make it so they can get out through regular industry and drive. That's why I wrote enterprise zones in 1978. And I tried to get all these other politicians to absorb it, and I couldn't get them. The only two guys I got were two white guys, Ronald Reagan and Jack Kemp. Jack Kemp wished he were black, and Ronald Reagan had never met a black. This is how do you address public policy issues? By looking at incentives, not making speeches on some goddamn podium at July 4th. And I'm sick and tired of these people sitting there sort of virtue signaling all day long when we have real problems in this earth. And the real problems are out there. Solve the real ones. Don't sit there. I love poor people. Therefore, I want to increase welfare payments. That's a guarantee of killing poor people. It's a guarantee of creating racism. Prosperity is the only answer. Who gives a damn who grew the rice that you had in your meal last night? No one. Good prosperity is racial free. It's gender free. It's age free. It's height free. Thank God. You know what I'm saying.
Yeah. So one of our audience members, so I'm opening it up for Q&A. Unfortunately, this doesn't allow them to speak directly, so I'm going to speak on behalf of them. So
Please do.
The person who's asking is Melchi Mispar Michael, a first-year PPE student at the London School of Economics, and I'm genuinely impressed by your career and ideas. Throughout your work, you've engaged in many thought-provoking debates and taken some unexpected paths. What's the most unconventional piece of advice you've ever followed, and what's the most unconventional piece of advice you would give to us students today?
So that I followed?
Yeah.
I had all the job offers in the world at Stanford Business School, all of them there, and I chose my heart to go into economics. I'd done my price theory comp, and I'd done my macro as elective courses when I was in the Stanford. And thank God I made a decision not to go to Wall Street, and where I was offered this selective one, the best offers of anyone. And I decided to follow my heart and get my PhD in economics and stay there. And I've never, I look at that to say I'd be a billionaire now, but who cares? That would be me eating caviar every day. I didn't need that. I'm really, really pleased with the path I took there. My most unconventional public policy advice that everyone gasps at is put politicians on commission. The one I just did for you. If you want good politicians, pay them for doing a good job. Don't pay them for doing a crappy job by stealing money from you. And if politicians were paid based upon the consequences of their policy actions, they would never vote the same way they vote. They never would. They would run it like a business, and you would elect people who were good at doing the business. And that's what we need to do. And it's very hard to do that because politicians, well, you hear everyone giggle. Look at you giggling right now. But that's what really needs to be done. And, it needs to be done down throughout the structure. Government employees, bureaucrats, need to be bonused if they do something really well. And not bonused if they don't. They need to be fired if they're doing a bad job. You got to run the whole system based upon incentives. If you've got a tenured teacher who gets paid the same amount as a good teacher with lots of students, you're not going to get excellence in education. Everyone knows who the good teachers are. The administrators know, the teachers know, the students know. Everyone knows who the crappy teachers are. The administration knows, the teachers know, the students all know. What you need to do, David, is you need to pay good teachers more than bad teachers, so you can upgrade the quality of education. Merit pay for teachers is the sine qua non of good education. Period. And I don't give a damn what all your things were, but once you get to be a good academic, look at your LSE, look at your Oxford, look at your Cambridge people. What happens to these professors who get to be famous and they stop teaching? They stop teaching just at the time when they should be teaching. Oxford should be for the students. Cambridge should be for the students. LSE should be for the students. And they should get the best teachers in the field. Not get them research grants where they go out and do something stupid. Have you seen the journals in economics? All the journals there are filled with just stupid articles. And it costs fortunes of money. We could live with about half the economists we have, if not a third of the economists we have, and do a much better job. All of these people all striving to be academics. No, people should strive to be good teachers. And you know exactly what I'm talking to you about, David. You know exactly. You go back and look at all of your teachers. Just tell me. Don't you, I mean, never mind. I don't want you to get yourself in trouble. But
well, as I was saying, how my late granddad, Professor Ding Zuyi, actually pioneered private education in China and founded one of China's arguably largest and most successful private university, and definitely started a movement there. And as I referenced before, he believed that young people are like water heated to 70 degrees. It's the extra support that an ecosystem and an infrastructure can provide with them, they too can flourish. So he advocated for good career pathways, technology training, language training, cultural exchanges, well-being, holistic education, one that builds character in addition to academic skills, like building great people above all. So he obviously also tried to treat the staff well and to
be a human. Be a human. But you know, you can't be a good person if you advocate policies that destroy people. And my job is to be able to get you guys to see the economics and to see that the types of policies your governments are perpetrating on its citizenry are having the effect of destroying the production base from whence all benefits ultimately flow. And that is what is happening in this world.
Another audience member, Fairy Xintian Li, she's actually on my podcast team, so she says, "Thank you so much for such a great and insightful talk. I'm a social policy student and I'm wondering, if we don't expand welfare spending such as on childcare, how can we make sure that advantages don't stay concentrated among the privileged? Many people argue that education-related benefits mainly help the middle and upper classes, so how can prosperity really reach those at the bottom, and how can we improve intergenerational mobility?"
Let me say that the existence of the status quo today is not of my making. There are some people who are poor. There are some people who are rich. There are some people who have cancer. Some people who are healthy as horses. You know, there is an initial trying to readdress all of the inequities that we find on planet Earth is a fool's errand. It can't be done. I beg you to read Harrison Bergeron by Kurt Vonnegut. It's a short story, Harrison Bergeron, where you find government trying to eliminate all the inequities that are sort of given to the human population. So let's, number one, understand that there are some things that can't be done. They just can't be. It'll destroy everything. There are some things that can be done and that are egregious enough that should be done. For example, I would make on, let's say, school education. I would love to see as much privately done as possible on education. But if there are people who cannot fend for themselves, that is the perfectly legitimate role of the government to come in and do as much as they can to allow their progeny to have equal opportunity, or at least some opportunity pulling up. For some people, it takes generations. And you just have to deal with the world as it is. But yes, there is a very major role. I don't know specifically what the educational subsidies they're going to do for the poor here in Britain are, the details, but you need to have some programs along that line. Do I support public education? Yes. I support it primarily for the very poor, the disenfranchised, to allow them a chance to break into the mainstream. In the same sense as to why I support no income taxes and no payroll taxes for those people as well. But once they become into the mainstream, then you're on your own. But it's not the job to redistribute between the millionaire and the billionaire. Let me take healthcare as an example. There are 3 things I think government should do in healthcare. Number 1 is for the poor and extremely destitute, those guys stumbling around with brown paper bags and stuff. Free clinics for those people who have no access to any health care at all. I completely support all that. For all people, I support medical price and quality transparency. In other words, all the information you have about doctors. I was chairman of the board of Centennial Hospital here for 3 years. Everyone keeps the information private. It needs to be made public. I'm for healthcare price transparency, so we know what the transactions cost is there. I could send to your people the paper I wrote on this called Le Croix de Santé. All right. The third thing I would like, not only for the poor healthcare clinics, not only medical price and healthcare quality transparency, but I would also like to see catastrophic healthcare insurance, guaranteed or required by the government. There are some things that are just so outrageously expensive that we're not going to allow people stumbling on our streets at the very, very unlikely event with a very large cost, that everyone should have catastrophic health care insurance, in my view. That's where insurance really does make a difference. You should not insure a person's lunch. No one should have health care for a lunch or a doctor's visit or that stuff. That's silly. Why not it for education? Why not it for healthcare? Why not it for housing? Why not it for food? Why not? And if you have insurance for everything, everyone's going to be collecting everything at zero income. And let me. I know we're coming probably to an end. Is our discussion. I want to do one thing with you, if I may, David.
Of course.
And it's just math, but I'm going to describe it to you. I'm going to prove the math theorem here to you verbally rather than with math. All right, and it's called the transfer theorem. And transfer includes the educational subsidies for the very poor. It includes unemployment benefit. It includes aid to the elderly. It includes all transfers in the system are transfers. Whenever you take from one group and give to another group, that's a transfer. When you take it from the young to the old, that's a transfer. When you take it from the tall to the short, again, I'm really into that too. I'm joking, I'm joking. Those are all called transfers. But we usually consider the transfer from those who have a little bit more to those who have a little bit less. You with me?
Yeah.
And that's why we have a progressive income tax, is because the rich, they have a little bit more, they can afford to pay more. Therefore, the poor don't have as much, and therefore they can't afford to pay more, and they should not have the same tax rates as the rich. And you understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I'm going to go through the transfer theorem with you, and I want you to follow it carefully, because it's math. It doesn't have to do with right-wing or left-wing economists, liberal or conservative, Republicans or Democrats, labor or whatever, conservative or whatever you guys have over there, your stuff. It's strictly math. A transfer is when you take from one group and give it to another group. The transfer I'm going to be looking at with you is the transfer from those who have a little bit more to those who have a little bit less. Now, by transferring from those who have a little bit more to those who have a little bit less, you've provided those who have a little bit more with a lower incentive to produce, and they will produce a little bit less. Okay? By giving to those who have a little bit less, you've provided them with an alternative source of income, other than working. And so they too will produce a little bit less. Your economists, if you have any listening on this podcast, and I mean people who know more than the education there, this is nothing more than the aggregate Slutsky equation. All right, by taking those from who have a little bit more, you reduce their incentive to produce, and they'll produce a little bit less. By giving to those who have a little bit less, you'll provide them with an alternative source of income other than working, and they too will produce a little bit less. The theorem here is, strictly speaking, right, whenever you transfer resources, whenever, you always will reduce total income and production. Always. I don't give a damn where you're teaching. You'll always produce less. Now the lemma from this theorem is fairly cool. The lemma should be intuitive. I'm not going to prove it to you verbally, but the lemma from this theorem is absolutely delightful. Is the more you redistribute, the greater will be the reduction in total income. And I think that should be intuitively obvious to anyone in your audience. The larger the transfer, the larger the drop in total income. But now the one I want to do that has all the piquant flavor, the spice, the garlic, the flavor, you thrill, the nostrils clear and the eyes widen and there's little teardrops here, is the limit function of this theorem. The limit function of this theorem is absolutely spectacular. If we were able to, and God, I wish Bernie Sanders or Wedgwood Ben or Neil McKinnock or any of these other weirdos, AOC, Elizabeth Warren, any of them, I wish they were on this podcast. If you were able to redistribute total income in such a way that everyone comes out exactly the same, if you were able to do the limit function to redistribute all income so everyone comes out exactly the same, there will be no income whatsoever. Now let me prove this to you verbally. In order to get everyone to come out exactly the same, what do I have to do? What I have to do is I have to tax everyone above the average income, 100% of the excess, and I have to subsidize everyone below the average income up to the average income. Are you with me? Now, if I actually did that, if I actually taxed everyone above the average income 100% of the excess, and if I actually subsidize everyone below the average income up to the average income, I will stipulate today, counselor, we'll all be equal at zero income. You cannot have equality of income without having uniform poverty. Whenever one guy, everyone's poor, but one guy makes an extra dollar, inequality is increased. And what you want to do here is you want to improve the lot of the poorest, not reduce the lot of the best, of the richest. When I watch your crazy, goofy, woofy redistributionist people, Saez and Piketty and Sancheva and Zuckman and all these other wonderful redistributionists, they're crazy. Yes, it is true. When you raise taxes on the rich, you reduce income inequality. You do, because you make everyone poor.
So
Everyone poor.
Castro from the audience has just mentioned how, what if those transfers are reinvested or redistributed in productive ways like new jobs or positions? Does that solve the issue?
No, well, not. It does not. It might help the issue a little bit if there are any funds to be redistributed. Of course, as you know, every time we've raised the highest tax rate, every single time, you can read my book, Taxes Have Consequences, which is the complete history of the U.S. income tax. We have every single tax return, all of them. All right? We have every one. This is not guessing. This is not sampling. We have every single time we've raised the highest tax rate on the top 1% of income earners, three things have occurred. The economy has underperformed, tax revenues from the rich have gone down, and the poor have been hammered. Every single time we've cut tax rates on the rich, three things have occurred. The economy has outperformed, tax revenues from the rich have gone up, and the poor have found good jobs. Now, it is true, income inequality is directly associated with the highest tax rates on the rich. The higher the tax rates, the greater the less income inequality we have, the greater income equality we have. That's true because everyone gets poor. The rich get poor faster than the poor get poorer. Now, take that to your person there and sit there and say, are there circumstances where we do need government investment through the tax system? You're damn right there are. You're damn right. We need schools. We need highways. We need judiciary. We do. But what you want to make sure, David, is there is a major role for government here. But it's not without limits. What you want to do is you want to go to the point where the last dollar spent, the benefit done from the last dollar spent, is exactly equal to and offset by the damage done by the last dollar of taxes collected. Whenever you find it where the benefits done from the last dollar spent are just a beep, 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 beep more than the damage done by the last dollar of taxes collected, you stop already. That's the proper size of government. Government should never be larger than that, nor smaller than that. There is a huge role for government in our society, what your person mentions. There is a huge role for it, but it's limited by marginal conditions. That's why you want a low-rate, broad-based, flat tax. Spending restraint. Sound money. Minimal regulations. We all know we need regulations, David. No one can choose to drive on the left-hand side of the road one day and the right-hand side of the road the next day. Everyone knows that. But what you want to make sure is that your regulations don't go beyond the specific purpose at hand and create an enormous amount of extraneous collateral damage. Free trade. We know. Everyone knows free trade's good. Everyone, but not 100%. I went through this in detail with you, with the flexibility, the leverage, and the reciprocity that free trade should not be under. We should not be selling nuclear weapons to North Korea. I don't give a damn what the gains from trade are. We should not be doing that. There is a role for government in trade. There's a role for government in regulations. There's a role for government in money. There's a role for government in government spending. There's a role for government in taxation. And there's a role in government in peace through strength. And now I think you'll understand why I really think Donald Trump, from an economic standpoint, you may not like his blonde or orange hair, you may not like the way he speaks, but from economics, this guy is spectacular. Now, Reagan did it with a very different style. Trump's style is very different from Reagan's, but their policies are almost identical. Do you finally get my whole gestalt? I hope your listeners do. I am not anti-government, period. But when you do redistribution, you make sure it's with people who can't work, rather than people who just choose not to work. You with me? Mm. I hope your readers, your podcast people here, understand exactly what I'm saying.
Mm. Final Q&A question before we wrap up. So this is from Castro. So I'm just reading it out. Thanks very much for your public service and sharing your experiences today. I understand all your points about incentivization. If it's within your expertise, can you comment on how certain concepts you've discussed related to tax policy may not apply to healthcare, like health insurance, pharmaceutical policies, which can be different from typical markets? You also touch candidly on your thoughts on privilege and desire for everyone to have privilege. Related to this, particularly in the US, there is persistently high income inequality with very visible differences between the top 1% of earners and the rest, the working class, middle class, etc., and differences in who pay equitable taxes. From a policy standpoint, how can we rectify this in issues such as working wages that do not keep up with inflation and other rates, support increased economic opportunity for everyone, and reduce poverty and other priorities without compromising other concerns?
Yeah. It's great, and it covers the whole talk I've given. Well, I've got a paper which I'm going to send you my Kansas paper.
Great.
And I'm going to send you my paper on healthcare transparency, which I did. It's called Le Croix de Santé. You can see the answers there. This is how to do healthcare and bring incentives back into healthcare. I'm not saying that insurance shouldn't be used in healthcare. It just should be much limited, and it's not now. And in talking about all of these things is, I don't find, and I'm going to say this very flatly, I don't find income inequality offensive in any way, shape, or form. What I do find offensive is poverty. I find people being poor people being locked out of the economic system as being atrocious and untenable. If someone chooses not to work and not to become rich, their own choosing, God bless them. If they choose to become an artist or a podcaster or a professor, they find there's a lot in life that is not economics. And what you could find. Now, hold on just a second.
Is it President Trump?
No, it's close. Thank you. There are all sorts of other things other than economics, which is fine. Which will lead. Some people like being rich, really love it. You know the people. They're not my type of people, basically, but they really like being rich, 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 rich. You know, I told you how I chose to not go to the business in Stanford, and I went to economics, and I loved it. I worship economics. I think it's fun, and I knew I'd be suffering a income. So that type of income inequality, I don't mind at all. I do mind poverty, and I do mind people who are precluded from coming into the system. And those are the people that the only two answers are: remove the barriers they have to going up. In other words, don't withdraw all welfare the first day they get a job, and reduce their burdens by reducing tax rates on those. That's why I wrote enterprise zones in 1978 for the inner cities. All right, but also the real answer is growth is the answer. You know, you cannot redistribute income if there's no income. You can't do it, David. Growth is the answer, and you know. Growth comes if you create economic growth, it will in due course bring back prosperity, opportunity, and wealth to the lowest income groups. And then we can redistribute it later. And people can compete. Some people aren't worth what other people are in the marketplace. They're worth much in the eyes of the Lord, okay? I'm not a terribly religious person, but they're worth a lot to their children, but they just don't have the same income potential as other people do. We don't need to redistribute those people, and no one should be left starving in the streets. People who cannot do it should be helped. And the government has a main role in doing that, period. But the growth is the answer. It's the way of doing it and the way of providing the best opportunity. Going beyond the growth policies, keep your touch light. You know, don't intercede in markets very much because the government just ain't bright enough to be able to figure out the wonderful thing that we call the economy. It's been created over thousands, millions of years, billions of years. And, you know, it's beautiful. Leave it alone. People know how to take care of themselves without the government coming in, and the government rarely acts altruistically after the first hour. Just look what's happening in Minnesota right now. If you watch any of the welfare thing, they're stealing from little kids on the welfare reforms, the whole community up there. It's just welfare systems become corrupt quickly when run by government. And recognize that fact. So I hope that answers your person's question. But it is all balance. It's all moderation. Moderate. Keep low. You know, let the economy solve most of the problems. And when there is a real break, that green thing in the guy's head, and you can tell, when you have that, then you do have a government solution. But keep it really low. Government is not your answer. It will take care of some egregious problems. It will. But keep those only for egregious problems. And it's a tough thing being a government. It's balance. It's yin and yang. It's, you know, where do I stop? Where do I start? What is the benefit from the last dollar of money spent? What is the cost of the last dollar of taxes collected? You know, that's what a government does with its legislature and its prime minister and president and all that. That's what they do. They make those adjudications. Do we need another park? Should the school have another school bus? Should there be a health care clinic nearby? You know, those are things that the government should weigh in on. Keep it light.
In the spirit of giving you the legacy with the interview, we've touched on many different topics and we really appreciate your time and your expertise. I have two to wrap up, but before then, do you have anything else that you feel like we've really missed that you want to be in the recording, or however you kind of found it so far?
Yeah, my dream for you guys is you are the future. And my dream is, you know, understand the future is of the earth, is the prosperity. And, you know, if there are any lessons I have to you, if you want a better earth for your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren 1,000 million years from now, you know, we need to run the system right. Economics is the answer. And economics really is the answer. It is growth, through low rate, broad based flat tax, spending restraint, sound money, minimal regulations, free trade, and peace through strength. You don't get a rich, prosperous world by waging war. You don't get a rich, prosperous world by having depressions.
Second to last question then. You were raised Presbyterian, so how does your faith inform your economics or your life at all? Like, is supply side economics a moral position as much as an economic one? And
no, it is zero. My faith hasn't. I love being a Presbyterian. To us, that's a social class. My mom and dad were Presbyterians. My one great-grandfather was a Presbyterian minister. We're not very much in faith. We believe very much in the miracle of what is. I mean, the universe, the earth, Darwin. I mean, it's amazing out there. It is wonderful. But I mean, as I said to you earlier, ik zijn erfurt for God. I'm just awed by what is life, by all of that. But it's not a religious thing where I go and pray. I don't. Not even on Christmas. And I don't. I really believe in economics. And I believe economics is the answer to poverty. I believe economics is the answer to peace. I believe economics is the answer to us achieving what we want to achieve in this earth.
Final question. I know you've obviously achieved a lot, but you also care deeply about people, and you're very grateful for the many support and your family, etc. I would love to both challenge you and offer you the opportunity now to end this interview by naming a few people and offering a tribute for how they have supported and helped you along your life and career, just to feature in this recording.
That's a cool question. Cool. And I'm going to take you, if I could do the table here that I'm sitting at. I have a glass table with a cloth on it, and there's a picture right in front of me every day that I sit here and look at every day. Justin Dart, Ronald Reagan, Jude Winniski, John F. Kennedy, Bob Novak, I said Margaret Thatcher, Howard Jarvis, and I said Justin Dart and Bob Bartley. And of course, you have to have Marty Anderson in that, and Jerry Brown. These are people that I feel are the sort of the saints of the movement. And without them, this never would have happened. There are 12 of them that I've named. There are probably a lot more minor characters all around, but these are the giants who have gone before us. Now, they're all dead. Well, Jerry Brown's not dead, but they've all gone before us and really done an enormous amount. And these are this sort of Diogenes, Diogenes, as they say in English, Diogenes with his lantern looking for the honest man. These are the people who are carrying it there. And I want you guys to be carrying this mission. The dream is to make everyone rich, to reduce poverty. The dream is not to make the rich poor. It's to make the poor rich. And keep that, it's all upbeat, positive. Don't have grudges, don't have hates. It's not the black man's fault or the white man's fault or the tall man's fault or the short man's fault. We're all in this tub together, David. And supply side economics works for every ethnic group. It works for every age group. It works for every gender group. It's just good economics. And please, please, please just understand it. That's what I hope you do. And these are the people upon whose shoulders I've been standing all these years, and I just love it. And I'm so proud of being part of their team. And when I join it, I hope I get my picture in that little group too.
Thank you so much for your time. It's so nice to meet you at the Oxford Union and to reconnect on the podcast. I know everyone really appreciates it, and we were so oversubscribed with people who wanted to join the call as well. So really appreciate it, and wishing you and your family a very happy new year and many blessings for the year ahead.
Right back at you. And please make sure you send me a copy of this podcast if you could to Jillian.
I will do. Thank you.
Thank you, David.